What if I told you that the root of your anxiety is not simply stress, pressure, or circumstances, but the very way you hold on to the idea of yourself? Anxiety feels like a storm that takes over your body, your breath, your mind. But what if the storm only seems so powerful because you keep identifying with it, believing it defines you? Today, we explore a radical Buddhist perspective that doesn't just manage anxiety, it dissolves it at its core. This perspective is called Anatta, the teaching of no self, and it might just change the way you see your entire life. Anxiety thrives on the illusion of control. You worry about the future because you imagine that your separate, fragile self must fight against endless threats. You replay the past because you believe your identity is chained to mistakes and regrets. The mind spins, over and over, building stories about who you are and what could go wrong. This is where Buddhism cuts to the heart of the matter. What if the self you are protecting is not even real in the way you think it is? The teaching of Anatta says there is no permanent, fixed I inside of you. What you call me is a collection of thoughts, feelings, sensations, and memories, constantly shifting, never solid. Yet you cling to these changing parts as if they were an unshakable essence. Anxiety grows out of that clinging. If you are convinced that you are a rigid, fragile identity, then every challenge becomes a threat. But if the self is not fixed, then anxiety loses its grip. Think about it. The feeling of panic, the racing thoughts, the tight chest. They arise, they exist for a moment, and they fade. The problem begins when you say, "This is me. I am anxious. I am broken. I am unsafe." By fusing identity with passing sensations, you build a prison. But if you can watch the experience as just a wave moving through, without tying it to a permanent I, then the wave loses its power. This is the Buddhist anti-anxiety mindset, to release the illusion of self, and with it, the burden of fear. Let's go deeper. Imagine anxiety as a flame. What keeps it burning? Fuel. In this case, the fuel is attachment. Attachment to how things must be, attachment to an image of yourself, attachment to control. When you begin to see that the self is not fixed, the fuel runs out. Without fuel, the flame naturally dies. Anxiety doesn't need to be crushed. It needs to be released by removing what sustains it. But here's the paradox. When people first hear no self, they often panic. They think, if I have no self, then who am I? Won't I vanish? But Buddhism doesn't mean you literally disappear. Instead, it means you see that your identity is not a prison of fixed walls. It's more like a flowing river. The water is always moving, changing, transforming. You exist, but not as a frozen entity. You exist as a process. And if you are a process, then fear of being shattered, broken, or permanently stuck loses its meaning. Anxiety often comes from resistance. Resistance to uncertainty, resistance to impermanence, resistance to discomfort. You want the world to stay still, predictable, controllable. But the world is not like that. Nothing is permanent, not your thoughts, not your fears, not even your body. The teaching of Anatta invites you to lean into that impermanence rather than fight it. When you stop demanding that life conform to your control, anxiety begins to fade. There's another layer, the practice of release. In Buddhism, release is not suppression. It's not pushing away fear or pretending it doesn't exist. It's seeing clearly that fear is just another passing event in consciousness, not who you are. You can sit with it, breathe with it, and watch it shift. The more you practice observing rather than identifying, the more spacious your mind becomes. Anxiety still arises, but it doesn't dominate. It comes and goes like clouds in the sky. The sky itself remains untouched. This is why meditation is so powerful in Buddhist practice. When you meditate, you train yourself to witness thoughts and sensations without clinging to them. You watch the flicker of anxiety like a passing shadow. You learn to sit in stillness, not because you force peace, but because you discover that beneath the turbulence, peace is always there. The self that panics is only a surface layer. Beneath it, there is a vast openness. Think about a time when you were deeply absorbed, listening to music, walking in nature, or being completely present with a loved one. In those moments, anxiety was gone, not because you solved every problem, but because the sense of me against the world had faded. You weren't trapped in a small self. You were just aware, flowing with the moment. That glimpse is what Buddhism points to: freedom from the prison of I, and, with it, freedom from the chains of anxiety. But the mind resists. It says, no, I must hold on. If I let go of myself, I'll lose everything. This resistance is exactly what keeps anxiety alive. The truth is, letting go doesn't erase you, it liberates you. You don't lose your life. You finally live it without the constant burden of fear. Anatta is not an abstract philosophy. It is a practical medicine. The next time anxiety rises, notice the story behind it. Ask yourself, who is anxious right now? Is there truly a permanent I that can be crushed, or is there just a swirl of passing sensations? This question is not meant to be answered with logic, but with direct experience. As you sit, breathe, and observe, you begin to see through the illusion. Anxiety dissolves not by control, but by clarity. And this clarity reveals something profound. Freedom is not in controlling life, but in releasing the grip on the self that demands control. Once you see this, your relationship with anxiety changes forever. But here's the paradox that makes anxiety so slippery. The more we resist it, the more it grips us. The more we tell ourselves, I must not feel this way, the louder the feeling grows. In Buddhist practice, this resistance is simply more craving, more clinging, another layer of attachment to the illusion of control. Imagine anxiety like a storm cloud drifting across the sky. If you try to fight the cloud, push it away, or demand that it vanish, it only lingers heavier in your awareness. But if you acknowledge it, here is the storm, you suddenly realize it is passing, never permanent, never you. It is just another ripple in the vast sky of awareness. This is the freedom the Buddha pointed toward, the understanding that you are not your passing states, not your restless thoughts, not even your fears. Modern psychology increasingly mirrors this insight. Practices like mindfulness-based therapy are built on the principle of non-attachment, of noticing thoughts and emotions without judgment. The Buddhists were teaching this thousands of years ago. Sit with the feeling, don't push it away, don't inflate it with stories. Let it rise and fall naturally, like a wave returning to the ocean. Anatta is not about destroying the self. It is about realizing that the self was never a fixed entity to begin with. And once this is seen, anxiety loses its throne. It cannot rule what it cannot define. But you may ask, how does one live practically with this mindset? How do you carry anatta from the meditation cushion into daily life, where stress is real, deadlines loom, and responsibilities never end? The answer lies in cultivating small moments of release. Every time you pause to breathe, every time you notice tension in your chest and let it soften, every time you recognize a thought as just a thought and not an eternal truth, you practice release. This is not escapism. It is wisdom in action. You do not abandon your responsibilities, but you learn to meet them without carrying the extra burden of identity. You stop saying, I am my stress, or I am my fear. Instead, you say, stress is present, fear is present, and like all things, it will pass. Buddhism also offers the powerful practice of compassion. When you stop clinging to a fixed self, you naturally expand into a deeper awareness of others. Anxiety often shrinks us inward, making us obsessed with our own survival. But compassion dissolves this contraction. By turning toward others with kindness, you step out of the prison of your own restless mind. The Dalai Lama often reminds us that one of the surest ways to ease our suffering is to focus on easing the suffering of others. This shift in perspective breaks the cycle of anxious self-centeredness and opens the heart to a much larger horizon. And yet, the journey is not about quick fixes. Buddhism is honest. Anxiety will return, just as storms return to the sky. The path is not about eliminating storms forever. It is about knowing the sky remains untouched, always vast, always free, no matter how many storms pass through. With each practice of release, you deepen your trust in that vastness. You see that even in the midst of chaos, there is a still point, a center that is not shaken. Think of it this way. Anxiety thrives in the story of permanence. It whispers that the pain will last forever, that the uncertainty will never end. But Anatta cuts through this lie. Nothing is permanent. Even your sense of self is in flux, let alone your temporary fears. When you see this truth clearly, you are no longer bound by the illusion of forever. You begin to rest in the flow of impermanence, not fight against it. And that resting is where peace grows. So what does release really mean? It is the willingness to stop grasping, even if just for a moment. It is choosing not to identify with the endless chatter in the mind. It is exhaling fully and realizing you were never meant to hold so tightly. Release is not laziness, not giving up, but the deep wisdom of trusting the natural unfolding of life. As the Buddha said, you only lose what you cling to. Anxiety cannot survive without your clinging. When you loosen your grip, you loosen its power. Now let me ask you, have you ever experienced a moment when you simply let go, and in that letting go, everything suddenly felt lighter? Maybe it was during meditation, or maybe it was something as simple as watching a sunset or hearing music that carried you beyond yourself. That taste of release is a glimpse into what the Buddhist path offers, not as a rare event, but as a way of living. A life where you do not carry the unnecessary weight of I, me, mine, but instead move with the flow of existence, open, compassionate, unafraid. The Buddhist anti-anxiety mindset is not about suppressing or erasing feelings. It is about transforming your relationship with them. It is about remembering that you are not the storm, but the sky. You are not the thought, but the awareness in which thought arises. You are not bound by fear, because fear is not permanent, and neither are you. And when this realization sinks deeper, when anatta becomes lived and not just understood, you find a freedom that anxiety cannot touch. So I leave you with this. What would your life look like if you stopped clinging to every anxious thought and instead let it drift like a passing cloud? Would you feel lighter? Would you breathe easier? Would you finally see that the peace you've been searching for was always here, waiting beneath the noise of the self? Share your reflections in the comments. I would love to hear how this teaching resonates with you. And remember, the journey of release is not a single step, but a daily practice. Each moment is another chance to loosen the grip, to trust impermanence, and to live with compassion. If this message has sparked something within you, if you found even a drop of calm in these words, give this video a like and subscribe for more insights on philosophy, psychology, and the deep wisdom traditions. Together, let us continue the path of release and discover the vast sky of freedom within.